How you feel today, Jacko?
Okay, Jerry.
All right. You know, a lot has been said about you, but the main thing is that people recognize the fact that you're able to play with real sincerity every style of music. Not only every style, but you can play all parts of a given piece at the same time on this one instrument, the bass. Now, because of this, a lot of people have gone crazy trying to duplicate what you do. People have become great fans of the bass and given it quite a bit of attention. How do you feel about that?
Give me a gig, you know.
Well, what drove you to this point?
Well, I was told, you know, like at a very young age to learn. First thing was to learn the melody to every tune, which I feel is like ultra important. You know, most bass players, most musicians, you know, not just on the bass, but on their particular given instrument, will usually play just the bass part or just the piano part. I mean, the same thing goes for piano players. They should know the bass part too, at least, you know, or whatever.
Right.
But the main thing is the melody, I feel, that most bass players like are missing. Because like they'll know the bass part, you know, or whatever, they'll be playing that stuff, and there could be a melody on top, which once you know that, especially when it comes to playing changes, you know, harmonic playing, it's like, let's say like Bach, like canons, where there's like two parts. There's a bass part and there's a melody part. They're just as important because the chords come in the middle.
One supports the other.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, in fact, one helps the other. By hearing another part, you can more or less define where your part's going to be. You can fill the holes up.
Well, plus it's really great to be able to play a melody to a tune. I mean, how many guys can play, you know, on the bass, you know, let's say. Most people, let's say the melody is always designated, let's say, to a horn player or the piano or the guitar. But it's nice to play it on the bass, too.
Certainly. It's a beautiful instrument. Now, what about musicianship? How does this tie in terms of what you studied? Obviously, you mentioned Bach canons. What else did you study? And how does this all come together under the heading of musicianship?
Work. You're just staying out there. In other words, you know, applying it. Okay, let's say so for instance, I just said learn the melodies. So what I tell all my bass students when they first start off is, hey, let's, you know, learn the melodies. Do you know the melody, let's say, to Alfie, as opposed to just the bass part? And, you know, I mean, that's, you know.
Right.
You know, et cetera.
Yeah, that gives you the feeling of the song.
Yeah, because then it, plus it's the most melodic way for a bass player to learn how to play melodic bass lines is by, you know, playing melodically within the bass.
Was there anything else you studied other than Bach? I know you spent a lot of time studying Bach.
Well, I got into that a little later. What I first started studying was, you know, let me see.
Oh, yeah. You got into the funk.
What was on the radio.
Yeah.
That's what I first started playing. Like, for instance, that was Funky Broadway, the bass line, you know, Wilson Pickett's Funky Broadway, so.
Tommy Cogbill.
Exactly, it's Tommy Cogbill. So doing that stuff is how I learned, listening mostly to radio, keeping my ears open. You know.
Now, were you reading music then?
I didn't start reading until I was older because I was always playing. And this is a good point because anybody that's born with a real talent to play, a natural talent to play, which, you know, I feel I have been, and most all good musicians, you know, that they are born with that talent. To be able to go out and play, they usually can play before they really study. You know what I'm saying? You go out.
Yeah, get the feel of it.
Yeah, you're out doing gigs and that sort of stuff. And then finally, when it came time for me to learn how to read, when I wanted to learn how to read because I couldn't, and it was really, you know, it was really a drag because I already could play. You know what I'm saying? So for me to have to go back and learn how to read was really a pain.
So obviously you learned because with your web report, the stuff that you did was extraordinarily intricate.
Well, I was reading way before I got with Weather Report.
Obviously, you had to. But you got to such a high level of reading, you know, to be able to do that at the same time. Any what did you use to get to that point?
Well, believe it or not, it sounds corny, just hard practice. You got to put in lots of hours because, like I said, you get fed up, especially for the young players that can already play. I mean, how many guys you know on the street and they all say, wow, yeah. I say, how's your reading? Well, I can read a little bit. Hey, what do you mean a little bit? Man, if a guy says that, you know he can't read.
Right.
You know what I mean?
That's
you got to sit down and practice reading. It's hard. I mean, I used to spend hours a day just with any book I could get a hold of. Treble clef, any clef, bass clef, of course, you know. But just any type of music I could get my hands on just to get in it.
How'd you get into playing the bass? I know you played drums earlier. Can you tell us that story?
Well, I was in a band called the Los Olas Brass. It was like a funk rock band, you know, play rock roll, a lot of rhythm and blues. All the hits, you know, Aretha, from everything like from the Tijuana Brass to you know, the big, you know, soul hits of the day. That's basically what we were doing. We had like 6 horns and 3 rhythm. I was playing drums and I had broken my wrist very bad playing football. And the bass player in the band, you know, he wanted to split. So I just went to the bass. You know, I went from drums over to bass. That was it. I was playing the bass within a week.
Wow. And the fretless bass?
The fretless, I took the frets out of my bass after I was, you know, because I was like getting into jazz a lot and I wanted to have that upright sound, you know. So I had an upright. The upright, I mean, it took me years and years to, you know, get enough bread to get it. I'm from Florida, so one morning I woke up, go in the corner, and the bass is in like 100 pieces, you know, because the humidity's so bad. I mean, the upright just blew up. I said, forget it, man, I can't afford this anymore. So I went out, got a knife, and took all the, you know, frets out of my Fender. That was it.
And the rest is history. Incredible. To be able to pick up an instrument and play within a week's time means you have to have some kind of learning skill, okay? And to take it to the next step, not only have a learning skill, but develop to execute such, you know, flawlessly as you do.
Well, the main thing is just paying attention to people on any instrument. For instance, you know, like you look at a guitar player, you just, you know, look at another bass player, just see what he was doing. That's how mainly I learned most everything.
So it's visual.
Visual as far as just technique. Let's see, you know, because I would see, one thing my father told me once when I first started playing the bass, he came home, he saw me, and he said, just to put my fingers, space them just like at every fret. You know, I mean, because I was just playing. You know what I mean? I was playing like that, you know, and with, you know, I mean, that's how I was playing the bass, right? So then he said, you know, so I would, you know, because I just put my, you know. Okay, so that's like spacing your fingers just by the fret. Is as big of a thing that you could do, and alternate your fingers accordingly. You know, I mean, it's just very basic.
Well, it certainly has worked. Now, as far as like getting into little details of this aspect, this left-hand spacing, okay. But what about the what other aspects of the left hand? Because your intonation is, I mean, you have, you know, to play fretless bass. First of all, intonation has to be right on it.
Well, one thing, for instance, right now I'm using a fretted bass. How I got my intonation on the fretless is by, first of all, I never practiced a fretless ever because the strings would always eat the neck up. So I would only play it on gigs. But see, when I would practice with the fretted bass, it's harder actually to play a fretted bass than a fretless because of the fret noise. So I would, you know, but I would play it, and you play exactly on the fretted bass where you do on the fretless. You just play, you know, I mean, you can play here in the middle, it doesn't matter because the tone's going to come out. And that's where you get the best sound also on a fretted bass. I mean, if you want to get into it. Clearer, exactly. So when you go to fretless, and seeing that I had taken my frets out, you know, I had little, the marks were still there because I put Duratape, some sort of wood putty in there, right? So you could see that, which helped too, you know, because, you know, the fretless, or Fender bass, excuse me, you know, it's got such a long neck. Like on the upright, you got position. You just go this far, and you're in the thumb position. You know, you can feel the neck.
Right.
I mean, you got to go about this far. You know, I mean, it's a long way. You got to look at the neck if you're making big jumps. So, you know, that helped a lot having the fret markers. You know, where the holes were filled in, And then practicing scales, you know, just straight scales, gets your hand in shape so that once you start off someplace, you know, once you get on the first note, you can go for a long time without having to, you know, check yourself out if you're playing in position. You know what I mean?
What about this twilight zone area up here where, like, where everybody finds it hard to play because you can play the same thing back here that you can play up here? How'd you work that up? Because you do a lot of your playing in this solo area of the instrument, you know.
Well,
Is it special?
different ways of doing scales. For instance, if you just go... See that? I came all the way from that low C. We're in the key of C. There's a low C, there's a high G. Okay, now this is all without moving my hand once. You see what I'm saying? And it's all right there. You know what I'm saying?
All in one position.
Okay, then there's other ways. See, because most bass players, for instance, this is something that I've been doing the last few years. So you know, taking like, going up to the third, then you got, you know, fourth to the sixth, you know, then major seventh, then you'd be the ninth. By that time, you'd be up to the 12th already. You know what I mean? It's like, that's very convenient as opposed to, you know, the way you usually would learn. See, I mean, that's how most people probably originally learned with
That's a
making this.
smoother approach.
Well, that's normal because that's the way from up here, like you were saying.
So you're playing on less strings. Yeah, that makes a big difference.
And to have skipping, you know, skipping from string to string, like good exercises are like sixes. Most people don't practice sixes. Like, you see what I'm saying? Where you're alternating a string before you're even going anywhere else. You're already jumping.
How about your endurance? You have incredible endurance.
That's just from years and years of gigging. That's all. I mean, I used to play 8 sets a night every night when I was a kid, you know, for a year at a time without a night off, that sort of stuff. That's just playing a lot.
You were playing in R&B bands then a lot then?
Yeah, just playing like rhythm and blues all night. Because I never really had to practice all that much for endurance because I had it from playing so much. Like in fact, I do most of my practicing without even an instrument, just thinking it. Because my chops, you know, from so many years of playing.
Well, that's where your musicianship really comes to the fore.
Yeah, well,
You can do that.
I'm just lucky enough to have, you know, grown up in an era when rhythm and blues was really at its forte. I mean, that's when you were doing most of your stuff, like with Atlantic and everything. And that's people, the style of music that people were into when I was growing up. So there were lots of dance gigs, you know, playing R&B and funk, and then sneak some jazz in on the side, whatever, you know what I mean?